Usually it's like smoking hot in this studio, and
it's winter now.
I don't like it.
Winter's cold.
I'm right by the big windows, too.
Yeah. Enjoy it. It's like all the natural light.
As we have the drapes pulled down.
Yeah. Well, there's one open. There's one open. Let that light
all
in.
The natural
Here,
blinds.
I'll turn these lights off.
Oh. Someone walked by and the lights are off. We're just talking to each other.
Okay.
All right, it's a little weird.
It's a little bit weird.
There used to be a way to stick it to the man. It was called rock and roll. But guess what? Oh no. The man ruined that too with a little thing called MTV.
Don't talk to me about rock and roll. I'm out there in the clubs and on the streets and I'm living it. I am rock and roll.
Did I listen to pop music because I was miserable? Or was I miserable because I listened to pop music?
Hey.
What's up?
So this album came out a while ago, and I was gonna review it. I was planning on reviewing it with you when it came out, and then you decided to go away
On a cruise.
Because this was released on August 31st.
Yeah.
Which was right before you went on your cruise. I think it came out, I don't know when you left. I feel like I actually sent you the link, and then you were just gone for a week.
I just left.
I
Yep.
assumed the whole week
I had more
you were,
important things to do.
You downloaded it, and you were listening to it.
No.
No. So,
But now we have.
yeah. So, I mean, obviously, if you've seen the title of this podcast, you know who we're reviewing, but I'm just going to give you some information first and foremost. Maybe you just listen to this without looking. So, this is something that's, I think, pretty great. This band was actually signed to No Sleep Records before they even played their first show.
That's crazy.
That is insane. They are from the UK. They're no longer on No Sleep. They're on Hopeless Records now.
Ooh, I like Hopeless
And
Records.
When we decided to review this album, I was like, hey, there's nothing to review this week. So what do you think? And you're like, actually, there is. And then you tell me about it. I'm like, yeah, that actually came out a while ago.
See, the thing is, one of their singles popped into my Apple Music
Right.
suggested playlist, and I was like, oh, I knew of this band prior to, and then I checked out the album. I was like, I've already listened to it.
And so we're talking about, now, we'd heard multiple ways how to say this, and then we actually looked it up. So when you look at it, it's WSTR, and I had read somewhere, someone said, oh, I think it's pronounced like Worcester, but it's not. It's actually Waster.
Yeah, it's Waster.
And so the story behind that, if you were one of those people who didn't Google and you were looking going, how do I say this name? I guess they had started their band. They were called Waster, and then they found a Canadian band that was also called Waster, and that Canadian band said, hey, please stop using that name. We like that name, and we had it first. Gosh darn it.
It's ours.
It's our name.
Yeah.
And so they're like, well, we're still going to call ourselves Waster, but we're just going to eliminate the vowels.
Yeah.
So there you go. That's what they are. And the album Identity Crisis. Now, they've been around for a couple of years now, and I think what they've mostly been known for is I saw someone describe it as diet neck deep.
Yeah.
They do sound. I'll make this argument. Their first album, which I listened to, I was familiar with these guys before this record came out. What is their first full length called again? It's like Red, Green, or In Between. Yeah. So, and I was actually initially confused because if you look at the artwork for that album, it's WXSTXR because they X'd out the vowels, right?
That's funny.
And so I was like, what is that name even? And then I saw, oh, it's just listed as WSTR. But so Waster, that album does sound an awful lot like Neck Deep. And it's funny to say, because when I say that, it makes it sound like I'm saying that Identity Crisis doesn't sound an awful lot like Neck Deep, but that's not true. It just sounds a little less like Neck Deep.
Okay.
A little bit less, but
yeah, you can definitely tell.
Yeah.
There's some Neck Deep vibes to this
For
album.
Sure.
Yep.
And I guess from what I've on Reddit I've seen anyways, I don't know if I've actually found any actual evidence of this elsewhere other than someone saying it on Reddit, but apparently Ben from Neck Deep, his brother, also writes and produces for Neck Deep, and is also like engineers and produces, or has anyways, for these guys. So there's some connection there.
Makes sense. I could see it.
Yeah. And so they, I mean, when if you've never listened to Waster before and you're wondering what they, what are you in for? It is, I mean, I kind of hate to say it, but it's way too obvious. It is Neck Deep 2.0. And I don't think that's them going, ooh, I like the way Neck Deep sounds. Let's just try and sound like Neck Deep. I think it's actually kind of purely coincidental almost in that sense.
Yeah, I think it just happens.
It just happens
they're from the same area, right?
Yeah,
kind of in the same scene, the same area, and I think that definitely happens. You're influenced by what's around you, and now, so it's not surprising.
I've never seen any. So Neck Deep is Welsh. These guys are, I guess, from Liverpool, I think. So the UK sort of pop punk scene. I don't think I've ever seen any music videos by Waster, so I can't necessarily make the comparison, because Neck Deep, I'm not a big Neck Deep fan.
Me either.
I don't mind them, but watching them, I'm always actually a little bit more turned off of them, because I just find that Ben just kind of lurches around on stage. I can't get into the stage presence and presentation of the band, which isn't everything for a band by any means, but when they're not doing enough interesting stuff for me, they're not capturing me, I just kind of go and move on. So I mean, maybe Waster has a more energetic sort of vibe that I can get into beyond their sort of sound that they have, but they do feel a little bit not musically lighter, but atmospherically lighter to me than Neck Deep does when I listen to this album.
Yeah, and for me, I wasn't a big Neck Deep fan either. Mm-hmm. We went to their show. Well, we went to go see Seaway.
Yeah.
And then I think you left halfway through Neck Deep.
I only stuck around for maybe 2 or 3 songs.
And I left shortly after too. So I'm not the biggest Neck Deep fan. I actually prefer...
And hold on, pause. To be fair, I initially bought tickets for that show to go see Speak Love, Speak Love.
True.
And then Seaway was added later. Creeper was on that show too, also from the UK pop punk scene. And they, in my mind, they actually, as far as being a band where I didn't know a whole lot about, they stole the show from me.
That was a fun really show. They definitely impressed me too.
Yeah. Sorry, but Neck Deep.
Yeah. So I've not been a big fan of Neck Deep, but I definitely enjoy this album more than any Neck Deep album I've listened to. They sound similar for sure. They sound like Neck Deep.
Yeah.
But I just prefer it, I think, over Neck Deep. I'm not a big fan of Ben's vocals.
Yeah.
And I'm not a big fan of whoever the lead singer is of this guy's vocals either. They kind of sound similar, but I just like their sound a little bit better.
I would actually say it's kind of weird, because I do enjoy, I think, the sound of these guys, of Waster, more than Neck Deep. And I don't want this entire podcast to be us comparing them to Neck Deep, but it is very obvious.
Yeah, it's pretty obvious.
But I don't know if their songs are better, if that makes sense, necessarily better crafted songs. I will say this is how I describe these guys specifically, and to an extent maybe Neck Deep a little bit, but it's obnoxious pop punk. When you listen to this guy sing, it's obnoxiously nasally and whiny.
Yeah, there's not a lot to his voice. It's very static.
But it fits and it's fine. I don't. Nasally vocals is something that's found a home in pop punk since the beginning of pop punk, right? Just that whiny sort of deal. Tom DeLonge has one of the whiniest voices of any singer I've ever heard.
But he's a legend.
And he's enjoyable. This is fine. Now, I didn't listen to this album a ton leading up to this particular podcast, because I had listened to it when it first came out, and there are definitely some catchy songs on here.
Oh yeah,
but they're almost catchy in maybe a little too annoying.
Yeah.
Is the song called Clarity?
Yes.
No, it's not called
it.
I think
what
it's
is that
Crisis,
one?
Right? I think that's actually the song. That's Crisis.
I actually like that one.
I don't mind it, but just that clarity, it just it grates on me a little bit.
Yeah, sure.
And then I don't want to be a part of your crisis. It's just it gets to be a little too much for me at times. But all in all, I do think the album, as I mentioned, it is pretty light and it is fun to listen to. Mm-hmm. It's not necessarily one that I didn't go back to it in this instance just because. I went back to it because you brought it up. Yeah. And I was like, okay, yeah, let's do this. It is an album that I wanted to review earlier on that we didn't get to. In fact, I think that week that it may have come out the same day as Boston Manor's Welcome to the Neighborhood, which is for sure what I reviewed while you were gone. But I think there was like a 2-week actual thing where I didn't have you on. You weren't gone for 2 weeks, just the way it worked out.
Yeah.
But anyway,
well,
so I didn't like begrudgingly come back to it though, going like, oh yeah, this album.
No. Yeah, and that's the thing. So when the single that popped into my playlist was Silly Me.
Okay.
So that one, and I think that track more than any other kind of stands out because it's not like the other ones. It's not a ballad, but it's a little slower. It takes it down a bit. And I think it just shows a little more range.
Right.
And so that's the one that kind of hooked me. And then I listened to the rest of the album. I was like, oh yeah, it's like your classic pop punk album.
Is Silly Me, is that the one like the Twisted Holiday thing? We're going on a twisted holiday.
No, it's like Silly Me. Dun, 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 dun.
Oh yeah, okay.
Yeah,
I was trying to get you to sing. But
yeah. No, you did it. You did it.
Yeah, okay. No, I remember that song now. There are definitely some. It wasn't an album where I necessarily went, this song is catchy, or I like the song. What's it called? And then looked it up. It does kind of flow, and it kind of exists there. And I mean, it's again like there are very few moments on the album where I'm like, ugh, like there are the odd ones. And I feel like, do they all end up in the same song? What is the one? There's one where like this like low like voice comes in. I think it's the Clarity song though. And it comes in, he's like, let me get some clarity.
Yeah.
And I'm like, get out of here.
Yeah.
I can't stand that. And then there's another one where it just sounds too much. Like, I mean, I understand it's pop punk, but there is one song again, or I didn't go back and like pick it out. To find a name, which is bad, but where melodically the melody he's singing is way too much like a boy band run filled sort of thing, or it's like I can't get into it, and it's somewhere within the first 5 songs on the album, I think.
Yeah.
So there are a couple moments where I'm like, I don't want to do this, but for the most part, it's fine. Like I said, the album exists, and it's not one that it comes on and I'm like, oh, turn it off. Right?
No.
Like, so it's not bad. It's easy enough to listen to for the most part, which is, it says something, I suppose.
Yeah.
Because like with Neck Deep, generally, I'm like, I don't really want to listen to this.
No, see, with Neck Deep's album, I listened to it kind of once through, and I never really went back to it. But this, I've listened, for a couple days now. I've kind of been going back to it. Yeah. For sure, Neck Deep influences. I even noticed some Blink-182 California album specifically influences.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
That's pretty recent for to pull from a Blink influence, right?
I know, and I was like, and I loved that Blink album too. Yeah. So for me, like I really enjoy this album. I definitely liked it better than Stand Atlantic.
Wow.
Not even close. I like this a lot more. Yeah.
Because like for me, those 2 albums don't compete, but in like the opposite way, where I'm like, Stand Atlantic for me is a much more solid album, and I think maybe it's just there's moments on it where I'm drawn in a little more with Stand Atlantic, versus with Waster, it's just kind of like, it's fine. There's nothing about Waster, about Identity Crisis, where I'm like, that's really not good. But there's nothing about it really, for the most part, where I'm like, oh, that's really good.
See, like we have basically flipped opinions on these albums because I felt that way about Stand Atlantic.
Yeah. So speaking of Stand Atlantic, I mentioned in our last episode that we picked Bearings Blue in the Dark still as our champion. Yeah. And I said, but I won't be surprised if Stand Atlantic wins the online poll that we put up. And at the time of recording, it still has another day or 2 left, the poll, but it's something like 69-31 or like percentage wise,
and I'm shocked
in favor of Stand Atlantic. And I was a little bit shocked at maybe how lopsided it appears to be. At the same point, I think like with albums, I find something comes out and you really like it, and that first initial sheen kind of wears off after a little bit.
Yeah.
And then, especially if something new comes out, they're like, oh, I really like this. So maybe initially you kind of like it more. And so that's kind of what I was banking on with Stand Atlantic winning the online poll. But at the same point, I didn't expect it to be so much. And I mean, I don't have a problem with anyone who says, like they like Stand Atlantic. Skinny Dipping more than Bearings Blue in the Dark. I'm like, that's fine. Like, people are going to like things,
Yeah.
obviously, right? We both agreed that we like Bearings more, and I still like Bearings more.
And that just goes to show you, like, even on this album, Stand Atlantic, right? Like, we just connected with a different album.
Yeah.
Like, we just prefer it, right? And so,
I would have been interesting because had it been, I mean, I don't know what your vote is yet for this week, but just would have been interesting if we did a versus between Stand Atlantic and Waster Identity Crisis. We would have been split.
oh, totally.
Like,
I think this album is way better.
which is so funny. 'Cause
Yeah.
it's not. Like as far as songwriting and everything, it's not. I'm sorry. But
Hey, I agree to
that's-
disagree, man.
Oh, I know, and that's the thing about music, and I think the idea that going in and talking about albums is I like seeing when we have varying opinions, because sometimes it can do one of two things. Like, you could either go, yeah, agree to disagree, or you can look at it and go, well, maybe I'm missing something with this.
Yeah.
And then in the end, maybe you actually go, oh, actually, I do like this more than I thought, or you still agree to disagree.
Yeah.
That's the beauty of music in general and having these discussions. But so getting down to that then, because now we have a decision to make specifically with Waster's Identity Crisis and our defending champ. Now, keeping in mind that if Bearings wins here, that's 5 weeks in a row.
Wow.
And so that means next week if they win, that means next week we got to put them up against a classic and see where they stand, right? So,
Right.
Waster Identity Crisis, where are you at?
Man, and I don't know if the sheen is wearing off on Bearings, but this album, for me, comes really close.
Yeah.
Like, it's really hard. I don't think I can put it above, what's it called?
Blue in the Dark?
Yeah, Blue in the Dark. But
It's like still
but it's
talking
very
about
close. Like, for me, this one comes as close as any of the prior
interesting.
three,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so I was thinking about it, I was like, do I really do that? I don't think this album is as engaging and diverse as Bearings, and for that, I can't put it over, but it's the closest. So no,
I'm trying to think what
Bearings is better.
Okay, I'm trying to think what we've reviewed against Bearings now. So obviously Waster, we had Stand Atlantic, we had In Her Own Words, 21 Pilots. What was the other one?
Well, this is
It would have came out after 21 Pilots, like, because it was Bearings beat 21 Pilots, and then the next week, I'm trying to think who we reviewed them against. I mean, I could look it up. I literally have the facts in front of me. But
Let's do it by memory.
That requires work,
In Her Own Words.
Oh, that's between you and me, but that was an interview.
No, maybe this is only 4.
Is this only 4?
This is only 4.
Oh, this isn't showing everything because this is engaging listening for the listeners.
We can edit this. I mean,
won't.
and by we, I mean you.
Yeah, that's why I won't. There we go. Stand Atlantic, In Her Own Words. What? I'm so confused.
Yeah. So this is the
This is the fourth?
This is the 4th.
Hold on.
No, you know what? This is the 3rd.
That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, because it was 21 Pilots versus Bearings.
Yeah, so that was one win though.
1 win.
Yeah.
Then it beat In Her Own Words. 2 wins.
Is that what came after?
Then
In
it
Her
beat
Own
Stand
Words?
Atlantic.
3. So this would be 4.
This is 4.
That still seems weird to me, but I could be right. I guess maybe I've done interviews in there. In between, I'm like, we've had so many more episodes, but some of those are interviews. Yeah. So there you go. Blue Bearings beating 21 Pilots, then beating In Her Own Words, and then Stand Atlantic. Okay, so this is 4. So it needs one more.
Needs 1 more.
Yeah.
But I still think Bearings is better.
Okay.
I mean, and I don't know if next week, like, the sheen is totally worn off and I'm just, like, done with Bearings.
Right.
But I got to look at my initial reaction to Bearings to my initial reaction to Waster.
Yeah.
And I still even today think Bearings has a better album.
I think it's fair, and that's what's going to make it tricky for a band to go 5 wins in a row, though, I think, is the fact that, like, obviously when a new album comes out and you really like it, now what we're doing is we're trying to listen to more and more music, right? Like, had Bearings come out and I wasn't trying to listen to something new every week, I could still very well be listening to Bearings as much as I was, or, I mean, maybe then it burns out a little bit because that's a lot, but, yeah, like it eventually gets to that point where you kind of go, okay, it's still a really good album, but I just don't feel like listening to it as much because it's not as new. But I mean, I'm still going to pick Bearings, obviously, in this instance, because this album was actually, I think for me, maybe the furthest. So it's interesting. Like you're saying, it's the closest challenger. For me, it's not, because I think like I actually really liked Trench from 21 Pilots. In Her Own Words really surprised me. And then Stand Atlantic, I still kind of really like. So whereas then Waster just kind of comes in there. It's fine, but I did want to actually give. So Bearings is going to move on for us. We got at least another week of Bearings, and
One
then
more.
Potentially, depending on what comes out or what we reviewed against, potentially a classic. But I did want to actually really shout out an album that did come out this week. So Touche Amore. They are a band that I'd never really listened to. I'd been familiar with them by name. I don't know when I would have initially heard of them, but I knew who Touche Amore was. So it came up in my Apple recommendations for new music. But their album, 10 Years, 1,000 Shows, live at the Regent Theater. I was simply blown away by this live album. I don't like live albums generally. It's neat for one thing that their 10th anniversary, the actual day of their first show, also fell in line with their 1000th show. Like that's impressive.
Wow.
When they I guess there's a video that they talk about, they kind of realized that this was possible leading up to it, so they kind of booked some shows and then like timed it out. It's not like they're like, holy smokes, that just happened. But like it was literally like within I think a couple months they were like, we can do this. And so it's a live album which has like 29 tracks on it. Now some of those tracks are like banter, right? So it's 29 tracks just over an hour long, which I'm like, okay, that's a live show. I was blown away by the energy, at least specifically to start the show off on this record, and not knowing the songs, I was surprised at still liking that, because I mean, I don't even really like live albums when I know the songs.
Yeah, me either.
Yeah, and so for this, I was like, it drew me in, and then took me, and I started listening to their latest studio album, which came out in 2016, called Stage 4, and it's absolutely incredible. Now, I recognize Touche Amore is not going to be for everyone. They're a post-hardcore band where most of their vocals are neither singing nor screaming, really. It's more like yelling. But if you haven't listened to them, I'd at least recommend giving them an opportunity and looking. They're a band where I go, okay, musically, they're interesting to me. Vocally, I can get past, maybe my initial reservations, because musically they're interesting and lyrically they're incredible. And so, yeah.
You are the lyrics guy.
Yeah, and so specifically the album Stage 4 is about the lead singer, his mom passing away from cancer, and him kind of like dealing and, sort of like moving through that.
Yeah.
And so every single song is about that in one way or another. And it's just like, I mean, having been someone who's seen someone, I've lost people to cancer and seen people get through cancer, like really close family. There's a lot to relate to in the album. And, so I would suggest, if you're not a big live album fan, I mean, 10 years, 1,000 shows, isn't necessarily for you, but check out Stage 4 by Touche Amore. Maybe I'll actually do a review of it at some point. I don't know though. That might be it. That might be the extent of it. And considering how much I liked it, that could be it. But anyway, this week's champ, Bearings, still holding on.
Such a good album. I mean, I'm impressed. To go 4 weeks is...
Well, it's funny because we've just we've just started this.
Yeah.
And so maybe so many albums will do this, because it's just like, well, that was okay. What came? Like, it's not every week that something comes out that you're like, oh, this is fantastic, right?
Yeah,
like,
we just started really strong.
Yeah, started really strong, but we have had some close contenders in the meantime.
Yeah.
Like you picking Waster as a close contender. I thought Stand Atlantic was a close contender. So, who knows?
Who knows?
I could look at a calendar and see what's coming out this week, but I don't generally do that. I usually just see what happens on late Thursday night, early Friday morning, and we go from there. But that's going to do it for another round. Bearing's going to move on to next week. Social media stuff I should get out there. Instagram at David to my peers. Facebook.com/Music to My Peers podcast, or just look up Music to My Peers.
You'll find it.
And then musicpeers.blogspot.com if you want to that's kind of the hub where you'll find all of our episodes. You can obviously find us wherever you're listening to podcasts. Make sure you subscribe. Make sure you do all that fun stuff. Leave us a rating. That would be cool. I don't know if there's any ratings on there. So leave us a rating. Leave us a comment.
Lets us know people are listening.
Yeah, and then find us on Instagram or Facebook and be like, hey, I totally left a rating here. And then I'll be like, yeah, high five. We're friends now.
We'll respond.
Because I literally have nothing to give to you. So other than my affection. My internet affection.
Yep.
I don't know.
It's a very shallow relationship.
yeah. I don't know what that means, but yeah, we'll be back. We got some special episodes coming up next week. Don't forget. Also, now this is what I just like start throwing stuff out. Between You and Me did an interview with them last week. So if you're a fan of Aussie pop punk, we reviewed their album.
That was a good album, man.
Yep. So
that was a good album.
Had the chance to chat with a couple of those guys they were in the back of a van. I was in front of a computer, but go check that out. And other interviews are up there as well. Anyways, I'm rambling, so we're gonna get out of here. Goodbye.